Words of Joy and Hope. It is the third Sunday of Advent, Year A, and the readings from Matthew 11 to 11. The commentary is by Father Fernando Armelini. A good Sunday to all. Today, we can consider ourselves fortunate regarding the generations that have lived before Christ. We know that Jesus brought to the world a message of love, peace, reconciliation, and many other things. Many things have changed since he came. But let us ask ourselves, this message that everyone appreciates, has it truly penetrated, or perhaps is still removed from our world because it demands too many changes? Also in our personal life, have we let this message in? That is, have we let Christ into our lives? This is the coming we are waiting for. We want to let him in, because if he enters our life and our world, he will bring joy to all of us. If the gospel truly entered in the world, certainly wars, violence, injustice will be eliminated. This is the question we ask ourselves: what to do to prepare for his coming? At this Advent time, the liturgy presents a person, a character who was prepared to receive the Messiah of God. And he has also prepared the people. He's John the Baptist. What was he doing? He preached on the banks of the Jordan River, and he preached and invited people to change their lives. He used threatening language. For the world was not going well, people behaved badly against God, God's law, and John said, "You brood of vipers, how will you escape from when punished comes? Produce now the fruits of a true change of hearts. The axe is already laid to the root of the tree, and every tree that fails to produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire." And also, he comes with a winnowing fan to clear his threshing floor and gather his grain into his barn, but the chaff will burn with fire that never goes out. The language used by the Baptist was threatening, and it is very likely that he understood it that way. He wants to scare sinners. It was the language that was often used even by the prophets who threatened with God's punishment. It certainly wasn't about punishment, but about the consequence of the sin committed. Sin always keeps captive the lives of those who commit it, with terrible consequences. Actually, the Baptist message was not a message of threats, but it announced great joy, because the coming of the Messiah of God would finally change the world where people were ill. A world guided by selfishness, of thinking about oneself, of wanting to dominate over others. And the Messiah would introduce a completely new logic, not thinking about oneself, but seeking in every possible way to do good for others. This is the center of the gospel that Jesus of Nazareth brought to the world. Therefore, it is about letting this gospel in, which is he who is Christ. Enter him in each one's life and in the life of the world. This is the wrath of God, which the Bible talks about and which the Baptist is talking about. It is nothing other than God's passion of love, who wants a new world, a world that is not guided by the criteria that comes from instincts, but guided by the new life he has brought, which is the very life of God, love. The Baptist has preached and invited people to prepare for the Messiah's coming. The Baptist was a person ready to receive the Messiah. Today, the Baptist presents us his spiritual path as he waited for the Messiah. The Baptist asked himself some questions. We did not expect this from him, having indicated that Jesus was the one to come. Now he seems to have doubts, uncertainties. He wonders, is he or isn't he the Messiah that I have announced? Where is the Baptist now? He's no longer next to the Jordan River. Today's gospel tells us that he is in jail. I will make a small reference to the place where he was a prisoner. The gospel does not say it, but the historian of that time, Josephus Flavius, does. He says he was in the Macarian fortress, one of the many fortresses built by Herod. It is the only fortress found today in Jordanian territory, in the eastern part of the Dead Sea, as you can see on my back. The other fortresses were west of the Dead Sea and the Jordan River. And this fortress was a privileged and strategic place because the other fortresses could see it and could send their messages with smoke by day and fire by night to the Macarian fortress, and from there messages could be resent to all other fortresses. In Jesus' time it belonged to Herod Antipas. It is there that the king frequently held parties. Remember that Salome danced for his birthday, and we know what happened next. Herod, they asked for the head of the Baptist, and Herod complied. Herod frequently came to this fortress palace, and it is here that the Baptist was a prisoner. You can observe the mountain where Herod the Great had built this fortress. You see it at the time that the sun rises, and then you can also see the reconstructions of Herod's palace. Let us listen now to what happened to the Baptist while he was in prison. When John the Baptist heard in prison of the works of the Christ, he sent his disciples to Jesus with this question: Are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another? The reason why the Baptist ended up in prison is told by the evangelist Matthew. He had denounced Herod's immoral behavior, taking as his wife his brother's wife, the famous Herodias. Josephus Flavius says that Herod had put him in prison because he feared for his popularity. The Baptist was a person esteemed by all and could cause an insurrection against King Herod Antipas. In prison, the Baptist was treated with great respect. He could receive the visit of his disciples, and naturally, he kept himself informed about what this Jesus of Nazareth was doing, the one he had presented as the Messiah of God. At this moment, we are surprised by the perplexities that begin to appear in the Baptist regarding Jesus, so much that he asks, is he the one who has to come, or should we wait for another? What brought the Baptist into this crisis? We need to read what the evangelist Matthew tells us before the Baptist puts these questions. And he does that in the two preceding chapters to the readings of today that we have heard. In these two preceding chapters, the evangelist Matthew mentions 10 miracles done by Jesus. What kind of miracles? Jesus heals a leper. Who were the lepers? They were those who were rejected by everyone because of their nasty and disgusting illness, as the incarnation of the sinner himself, of people rejected by people and rejected also by God. Then Jesus made the lame walk. He opened the eyes of the blind. These were people that could not enter the temple because they had these defects. And God rejected those who had some diseases or defects because it meant they were sinners, and therefore they should be far from God. So it is not surprising that the Baptist was taken aback. Jesus not only did not behave severely and rigorously as the Baptist had announced, not only did he not condemn sinners, but he was partying with them. He ate with them, boasted of being a friend of publicans, tax collectors, and sinners. Instead of cutting trees that did not bear fruit, Jesus does not break the bowed cane, does not extinguish the wavering candle. No one hated evil as much as Jesus did, but no one loved sinners more than he did. The purpose of his life was not to punish sinners. They were unhappy people, and Jesus wanted to fill them with joy. He wanted to make them feel accepted and loved by God. But isn't it that sinners had to be avoided, as lepers who were marginalized were avoided? The Baptist knew very well what the psalmist says. So Psalms 139 says, "If only you would slay the wicked, O God, and drive away from me the violent. I hate those who hate you, O Lord, and loathe those who defy you. I hate them deeply. They have become my foes." 139, 21, 22. This was the way how the righteous should behave. The God in whom these people believed, educated by the spiritual guides, was a strong God who punished his enemies harshly. Just think of the 10 plagues of Egypt. God punished those who opposed his designs. But here, instead of 10 plagues, we find 10 works of love for the marginalized and the excluded. We must not then marvel that the Baptist has entered into this crisis. Let us try to think. What were the Baptist expectations? Expectations that we are now trying to study here. But let us also try to ask ourselves, what are our expectations about the coming of the Messiah of God? What kind of Messiah do you expect? What do you expect from Jesus? Jesus wants to enter your life with his gospel. What do you expect this to produce in you? Our expectations could be frustrated. We may expect God's Messiah for things that he did not come to bring. To be more explicit, he has not come to solve our problems through miracles, replacing what we are called to do. Who waits for this Messiah will be frustrated and turn to other messiahs who will give them what they expect. It can be science, technology, medicine. And not only the Baptist, but also Peter was disappointed in the Messiah of God. Peter expected another kind of Messiah, a glorious, victorious Messiah. There is another element that has perplexed the Baptist also. He is in prison and knows very well what the prophets have said. Thus, Isaiah chapter 61:1 says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim liberty to captives, freedom to those languishing in prison." This is the Messiah, the Baptist thinks, and I am in prison, and Jesus does nothing to bring this about. Let us understand the change the Baptist must make on his expectations about the Messiah. He has identified the Messiah of God, but, like all the people of his time, including Peter, he expected the Messiah to be somebody else. His expectations were other. And this is the message for us today also. The Baptist tells you, do like me. Do not be afraid if the gospel questions your expectations, your convictions, your assurances, your religious traditions. If the arrival of the gospel in your life leaves you alone, if you don't question anything on your conception about the face of God in whom you have always believed, if it does not turn the scale of values on which you have bet your life, you can be sure that it is not the gospel of God, because the gospel of God is revolutionary. It throws down your expectations and the behaviors that seem logical to you because they come from the wisdom of the world, which appears as the most logical to all. The faith in God that is revealed in Jesus can only be accompanied by questions about our certainties, difficult to believe and accept Him. Remember the parable of the two sons narrated by Jesus. The first says, yes, immediately to the father. I am going to work in the vineyard. But then he doesn't go. And the second one says, I am not going. But then he reflects and goes. It is the second that has understood what the father wanted and what it means to listen to the father. It was a difficult thing. He spontaneously says he is not going. I think that in front of the gospel that wants to enter into our life, our first reaction could be, wait a moment, because this requires many changes in me. It disturbs my life. This is the time of preparation for His coming. It is not easy to let the Messiah of God enter our lives. It hasn't been easy for the Baptist either. Therefore, let us not marvel that it is not easy for us today. If one does not experience this perplexity, if you are not surprised and bewildered in front of the gospel, it means that it has not been understood, that you continue to read it, adapting it to what you have always thought and seem to understand. Let us listen now to what Jesus responds to the Baptist. Jesus said to them in reply, go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind regain their sight. The lame walk. Lepers are cleansed. The deaf hear. The dead are raised. And the poor have the good news proclaimed to them. And blessed is the one who takes no offense at me. It is beautiful. Jesus does not marvel at the perplexity of the Baptist. I think he would have marveled if this had not happened. When the Messiah of God enters a person's life, he throws down and away the criteria that previously constituted all certainties. The answer Jesus gives is not with reasoning. It is a description of what happens when the Messiah of God enters the world, and it is well received. It is about 6 new realities, and all are signs of salvation, none of condemnation. It is the beginning of the new world. What are these signs? The first, the blind open their eyes. It is the gospel, the Messiah of God, that opens the eyes of those who walked in the dark, who did not know what they were doing in the world. They had no purpose in life. Now the gospel enlightens them and they know how to build a life that has meaning and makes sense. The second sign, the lame. Now they walk. They are those who did not move to take a step in life. They lived on alms, on subterfuges, on deceptions, and now they walk, maybe even stumbling a little, but they are going in the right direction. The third signal, the deaf. The deaf are those who are locked in themselves. They only hear the voice of their own instinct, of their own passions, of their own ambitions. They are deaf to all calls to leave themselves, to think of others, to think of the poor, of those who have some need. They don't feel any of this. Now they hear the gospel, their ears are opened, and they are attentive to the request for help from those who need them. Lepers. Lepers are those who feel ashamed of themselves. They perceive themselves as disgusting because of the leprosy of their sins. They are marginalized and all avoid them. Everyone passes them by. Now the gospel purifies them, makes them pleasant, splendid, because upon receiving this Messiah in their lives, they are completely transformed. Also, the dead who rise. They are those who were only worried and centered on their biological life, the life that ends. They just thought of eating, drinking, having fun. Now a new life appears, which is the life of the Spirit. And it is this life of the Spirit, which is love, that makes a real life, human life. Then the poor. The good news is preached to the poor. Who are the poor? Those who were considered miserable, hopeless. Now they have heard the good news. There is also salvation for you. Also for you it is the unconditional love of God. Are you sure that Christ has entered today in you? That his gospel has entered into your life? How do you know that you have received the Messiah of God, that you have received his gospel? The answer is not found in speeches, in reasoning, and even less in religious practices. If you have let the gospel into your life, you must verify the presence of all these signs that Jesus has mentioned. Have these changes occurred in you? Did you open your eyes? Do you continue to see money, profession, family, friendships, political options as you saw them before? Or does the gospel make you see these things differently? Jesus ends his answers with a beatitude. It is the 10th beatitude we find in the Gospel of Matthew. And blessed is the one who takes no offense at me. What is the offense, the scandal that Jesus is talking about and that has brought the Baptists into crisis? It is the scandal of God's unconditional love. The God who loves the good and the bad, the God who does not punish anyone, but draws everyone to joy and life. The bad God who makes pay the one who transgresses his orders. It is a God who instills fear, but does not shock anyone. Why doesn't this God scandalize anyone? Because he reasons as we reason. We reason that the good are loved, should be loved, and the bad should be punished. Jesus says, blessed is he who receives and accepts this new face of God that I brought into the world. It is the Messiah of God who has brought this face of God that is love and only love. Jesus says, happy the one who is not scandalized by this face of God. This beatitude is an invitation to the Baptists not to marvel at the surprises of God. Has Jesus lost esteem for the Baptists because of the difficulties he had in accepting the Messiah of God? Let us now listen. As they were going off, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. What did you go out to the desert to see? A reed swayed by the wind? Then what did you go out to see? Someone dressed in fine clothing? Those who wear fine clothing are in royal palaces. Then why did you go out? To see a prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, Behold, I am sending my messenger ahead of you. He will prepare your way before you. Amen, I say to you, among those born of women, there has been none greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. When the Baptist disciples walk away after hearing what Jesus has presented as the sign of the coming of the Messiah of God in the world, therefore all these changes that have led to joy and life. So as they move away, Jesus asks 3 questions to those who have heard him. And he says, What did you go out to contemplate in the desert? A reed shaken by the wind? The answer is clearly no. The Baptist is not like those reeds that grow along the Jordan River and that are a symbol of the volubility because they bend according to the wind direction. The Baptist is not an opportunist who adapts to all situations and bow to the mighty of this world. He could have been full of privileges if he had done so before Herod, who deep down esteemed him and listened to him carefully. But no, the Baptist stands firm. So let us try to ask ourselves today. We know the gospel, we have heard it, we appreciate what Jesus has said, his life proposal. But then there are these fashions, the new winds that say, come on, yeah, the gospel, yes, but it is necessary to adapt it a little. Situations change. There is evil, convenience. So, if we get carried away by fashion, by new winds, then we are not straight people as the Baptist was, whom Jesus praises. When one is convinced of certain options that the gospel has suggested, we must have the courage to carry them out, even if one feels lonely, even if others turn on the novelty and tells you, we are no longer in the Middle Ages. But no, the one who is convinced of the proposal of the gospel stands firm, like the Baptist. Second question, what did you go out to see? An elegantly dressed man? Jesus said, look, those who dress elegantly live in the royal palaces. The Baptist was not one who was dressed in the latest fashion. The Baptist has nothing to do with those who squander in elegant clothes. Now, okay, aesthetics is the person's choice. It goes beyond utilitarianism, and the search for beauty is a good thing. But when the search for beauty becomes wasteful, in unbridled use, it becomes idolatry of the ephemeral. It is the sign that the person has lost sight of the true values. Facing certain waste in futilities, a Christian feels disapproval and disgust for the waste that must be directed to satisfy much more elementary and urgent needs. Third question, Jesus asks. So, what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. Amen, I say to you, among those born of women, there has been none greater than John the Baptist. John is a prophet. No one in the Old Testament had a mission superior to that of the Baptist. More than Moses, the Baptist is an angel sent to prepare the liberating coming of the Lord. And it is bigger than Moses because today, with his life, with his conversion to the novelty of the Messiah of God, he is for us a model, an example of how we should let the gospel into our lives without marveling at the changes that presupposes. And the final sentence is very interesting. And yet the last in the kingdom of heaven is greater than him. Not by personal holiness, but because the Baptist has stayed at the threshold of the new times. He has not seen Easter. We have today the possibility of fully contemplating the Messiah of God. Since it appeared at Easter, we are more fortunate than the Baptist. I wish you all a good preparation for Christmas and a good Sunday.